Hey, this is Travis. We're coming to you from Collector Haven with our first comic book review. Today we are going to be looking at G.I. Combat from DC. It's part of the New 52. It's actually the second wave of the New 52. This book is actually replacing this book, Men of War. Men of War got canceled after 8 issues, and mostly because it's a bad book. Men of War was for the most part written by Ivan Brandon and Tom Derenick. He was the artist. And I hope I did the names right, but they also had a backup story that for the first few issues went from Jonathan Vankin and Phil Winslade. The problem with Men of War that G.I. Combat actually fixed a lot is that Men of War is about Joseph Rock, the grandson of the original Sergeant Rock. The reason that it didn't really work very well is I'm not sure if they tried to do this by choice or by design, but from issue to issue, the main story of Joseph Rock doesn't really flow very well. It kind of like they're in issue 1 and 2 kind of keep together, but then after that it goes from issue to issue where it's like an entire mission is taking place in just one country, and then the next issue is in a completely different country, and they don't really, it's just like they don't have a drop off. It's just kind of like they're already there and they've been there for a while and they're just kind of doing their thing. So it didn't really do that well, even with Jeff Lemire in the last issue who works on Animal Man. He just basically in the last issue, issue 8, it's basically a Frankenstein Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. book, really. There's hardly any, Joseph Rock in the book at all, and it just kind of gets really confusing. It was one of the 6 lowest selling books, and that's why it got canceled after 8 issues, I should say. But G.I. Combat, featuring, meaning featuring The War the Time Forgot. This is actually, 1, it's combat, 2, it's got freaking dinosaurs on it. So this was actually the reason we chose to do this one first as our first comic review is because this one was actually done very well. The backup story for G.I. Combat is The Unknown Soldier. And this book was actually kind of surprising for me. It was written, the main story arc was written by J.T. Kroll and the artwork by Ariel Olivetti, I want to say. And then the backup story was written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, or Miotti, no idea. And the artist with Dan Panosian. Now, The War the Time Forgot, the main story in G.I. Combat. G.I. Combat featuring, which I'm assuming because it says featuring, they're going to have a few other issues coming out, a few different characters. That's not just The War the Time Forgot. And it might be a rotating story, kind of like how the DC Universe Presents is. They'll maybe do a story arc and move on to somebody else. But the backup story, as far as I know, is also a rotating story. They started out with Unknown Soldier. It's kind of weird because, to me, in my opinion, the backup story was actually done better than the main story. The main story is actually good. The reason that I'm even doing this review for G.I. Combat is because I was so surprised at how well G.I. Combat was, because it's basically replacing Men of War. Not all 6 of the new books coming out in the second wave are just flat out replacing another book that got canceled, but G.I. Combat pretty much basically is replacing Men of War. But G.I. Combat, it was much more well written. The artwork, I think, looks, well, for the most part, for Unknown Soldier, looks better. War the Time Forgot, it's that type of art style that you can get into very easily, or you'll just read for the character and you'll just read for the writing, which is basically what I read it for. But like I said, it's got freaking dinosaurs. So G.I. Combat #1, it's definitely worth buying. It's definitely worth checking it out. It's one of those that if you're not into war comics, then you're just not going to get into it. But it's G.I. Combat, so you should already know that. It's going to be a war story. And this one is actually written well enough that people that haven't been, like myself, I'm not really into war stories. But I got into it very easily. And I decided that, this was worth reviewing, worth picking up and reading, and I was actually quite pleasantly surprised. And I was actually not expecting much from Unknown Soldier, because it's a backup story. Usually you think it's going to be a shorter story, they're just going to throw something together, and it's going to be, a couple of breakout artists and writers that are just kind of like getting their chance to do something. But actually, it's actually well written. I like the art style, and I actually wanted to read more of The Unknown Soldier after I got done with it. So I'm actually looking forward to next month when I pick up issue #2. So, like I said, G.I. Combat featuring The War the Time Forgot and backup story of The Unknown Soldier. I would definitely give this a 4 out of 5. It's definitely worth at least trying. Even if you're not a war fan. If you're not a war fan, it's a 3 out of 5. If you are a fan, then it's a definite 4 out of 5. So, that was our comic book review for this month. Not this month, but for this week. Today, we might do another one tomorrow. Who knows? It'll happen sometime. But yeah, from Collector Haven, I'm Travis. We'll see you next time.